Last time we got through the portion of Socrates kind of showing that Polemarchus' account or conception of justice was lacking. Remember, Polemarchus said that riffing off of his father, justice is doing good to your friends and doing harm to enemies. And now Thrasymachus has joined the conversation. And Thrasymachus now has just said, as we read last time, and I quote, "Justice is nothing other than what is advantageous for the stronger." And then he says, "Well, why don't you praise me? No, you are unwilling." And I talked about last time how this is kind of a naturalistic view of justice. You might see this as a prefiguration of the kinds of views that are going to be put forth by thinkers like Machiavelli and Friedrich Nietzsche, who will argue that justice and morality are separate. Okay, politics and morality are separate. They don't have anything to do with each other. And that because the natural world out there is basically might makes right, there are winners and losers, takers and relinquishers, that's the way that politics works too. So what Thrasymachus is basically saying here is that whoever is in charge, whoever the ruler is, they decide what justice is in that city or in that nation. There is no objective conception of justice outside of the laws that are made in a city or in a society. Okay? So we're picking up with what Socrates is saying now in response to this, right? At 338 C5, approximately. All right. Who would like to be Thrasymachus today? I'll be Socrates. Anybody? You're all terrified. Okay, fine. I will play both parts. But the actor I am. First, I must understand what you mean. For as things stand, I do not. What is advantageous for the stronger, you say, is just. What on earth do you mean, Thrasymachus? Surely you do not mean something like this. Polydamas, the pancretist, is stronger than we are. Beef is advantageous for his body, so this food is also both advantageous and just for us who are weaker than he. You disgust me, Socrates. You interpret my account in the way that does it the most evil. That's not it at all, my very good man. I only want you to make your meaning clearer. Don't you know, then, that some cities are ruled by a tyranny, some by a democracy, and some by an aristocracy? So what Thrasymachus is getting at here is that what is just in a society is relative to the rule of that society. Okay? So what's going to be just in a tyranny is going to be different from what's just in a democracy. And this is going to be different from what's just in an aristocracy. Okay? The status quo, or the ruler, decides what justice is in that particular place, in that particular city. Of course I do. And what is stronger in each city is the ruling element, certainly. And each type of rule makes laws that are advantageous for itself. Democracy makes democratic laws, tyranny, tyrannical laws, and so on with the others. And so by legislating, each declares that what is just for its subjects is what is advantageous for itself, the ruler. And it punishes anyone who deviates from this as lawless and unjust. That, Socrates, is what I say justice is. The same in all cities, what is advantageous for the established rule. Since the established rule is surely stronger, anyone who does the rational calculation correctly will conclude that the just is the same everywhere. What is advantageous for the stronger, or what the ruler decides, what the ruling element decides. Now I see what you mean. Whether it is true or not, I will try to find out. But you yourself have answered that what is just is what is advantageous, Thrasymachus, whereas you forbade me to answer that. True, you have added for the stronger to it. And I suppose you think that is an insignificant addition. It isn't clear yet whether it is significant. What is clear is that we must investigate whether or not it is true. I agree that what is just is something advantageous, but you add for the stronger. I do not know that. We will have to look into it. Go ahead and look. That is just what I am going to do. Tell me then, you also claim, don't you, that it is just to obey the rulers? I do. And are the rulers in each city infallible, or are they liable to error? No doubt they are liable to error. So when they attempt to make laws, they make some correctly, others incorrectly? I suppose so. And the law is correct if it prescribes what is advantageous for the rulers themselves, and incorrect if it prescribes what is disadvantageous for them. Is that what you mean? It is. And whatever laws the rulers make must be obeyed by their subjects, and that is what is just. Of course. According to your account, then, it isn't only just to do what is advantageous for the stronger, but also the opposite. What is not advantageous? What is that you are saying? The same as you, I think, but let's examine it more closely. Haven't we agreed that the rulers are sometimes in error as to what is best for themselves when they give orders to their subjects? And yet that it is just for their subjects to do whatever their rulers order? Wasn't that agreed? I suppose so. You will also have to suppose, then, that you have agreed that it is just to do what is disadvantageous for the rulers and those who are stronger, whenever they unintentionally order what is bad for themselves. But you say, too, that it is just for the others to obey the orders the rulers gave. You are very wise, Thrasymachus, but doesn't it necessarily follow that it is just to do the opposite of what you said? Since the weaker are then ordered to do what is disadvantageous for the stronger? By Zeus, Socrates, that's absolutely clear. So do you see the argument that Socrates has brought up here? Does anybody see what he's trying to say? What argument is Socrates putting forth? Yeah.
Is he saying that the weaker are already at somewhat of a disadvantage, and you're putting them at a further disadvantage if the rulers are they're in error whenever they make their own law?
Something similar to what you're saying. First he asks Thrasymachus, well, are rulers, do they always legislate in their own interests? And Thrasymachus is forced to concede, well, no, sometimes rulers make mistakes. Sometimes they make laws that if people follow them, it doesn't actually do them very much good, the rulers, right? And so what Socrates is trying to get at is, because Thrasymachus said that justice is what is advantageous for the ruler, but sometimes the ruler makes laws that disadvantage them, that there's a contradiction here. Right? Basically what he's saying is, since rulers are fallible, they may not know what their interests are, and they may legislate against their own interests. So what then? What is justice then if rulers legislate against their own interests? Well, obviously justice can't be what is just advantageous for the stronger then, right? Because if the people follow the rulers in the laws that they make and they're fallible, sometimes the subjects will do things that are disadvantageous for the rulers. And that contradicts what Thrasymachus said before. And Polemarchus is kind of stunned by this, right? He says, by Zeus, Socrates, that's absolutely clear. But then Cleitophon interrupts, okay? Cleitophon, like Thrasymachus, is a sophist. Or at least he's in league with the sophists, okay? And he pipes in and says, Of course it is, if you are to be his witness at any rate. And then Polemarchus chimes in. Who needs a witness? Thrasymachus himself agrees that rulers sometimes issue orders that are bad for them, and that it is just for the others to obey them. That, Polemarchus, is because Thrasymachus maintained that it is just to obey the orders of the rulers. Yes, Cleitophon, and he also maintained that what is advantageous for the stronger is just. And having maintained both principles, he went on to agree that the stronger sometimes order the weaker who are subject to them to do things that are disadvantageous for the stronger themselves. From these agreements, it follows that what is advantageous for the stronger is no more just than what is not advantageous. So, Socrates has revealed a contradiction in Thrasymachus' view, right? But what is happening here? Well, these two different guys are piping up, and they're basically arguing for the side that they're on. Okay? The conversation was Socrates versus Thrasymachus, but then when this contradiction became apparent, who pipes up? Well, Cleitophon pipes up in favor of Thrasymachus' position, because he's Thrasymachus' friend, and Polemarchus, who now has been swayed to Socrates' side, is defending Socrates and saying, no, Socrates is actually right here. You're being an idiot. So basically, they're just arguing for their respective sides here. Okay? What's interesting is that Polemarchus is now on Socrates' side. Right? Earlier in the dialogue, they were arguing about justice. Or you might say they were trying to figure out what justice was together. But they were at odds a little bit. Now, Polemarchus has seen the light, as it were, seen the wisdom of Socrates, and now he kind of sees Socrates a little bit as his mentor, rather than seeing the sophists as where he should be getting his education. Does that make sense? Okay, let's continue on then. Cleitophon responds, well, what he meant by what is advantageous for the stronger is what the stronger believes to be advantageous for him. That is what he maintained the weaker must do, and that is what he maintained is what is just. But it is not what he said. It makes no difference, Polemarchus, Socrates says. If Thrasymachus wants to put it that way now, let's accept it. But tell me, Thrasymachus, is that what you intended to say? That what is just is what the stronger believes to be advantageous for him? Whether it is in fact advantageous for him or not? Is that what we are to say that you mean? Not at all. Do you think I would call someone who is in error stronger at the very moment he errs? I did think you meant that when you agreed that the rulers are not infallible, but sometimes make errors. And Thrasymachus comes back with kind of a little mean response. That is because you are a quibbler in arguments, Socrates. I mean, when someone makes an error in the treatment of patients, do you call him a doctor in virtue of the fact that he made that very error? Or when someone makes an error in calculating, do you call him an accountant in virtue of the fact that he made that very error in calculation? I think we express ourselves in words that, taken literally, do say that a doctor is in error, or an accountant, or a grammarian. But each of these, to the extent that he is what we call him, never makes errors. So that according to the precise account, and you are a stickler for precise accounts, no craftsman ever makes errors. It is when his knowledge fails him that he makes an error. And in virtue of the fact that he made that error, he is no craftsman. No craftsman, wise man, or ruler makes an error at the moment when he is ruling, even though everyone will say that a physician or a ruler makes errors. It is in this loose way that you must also take the answer I gave just now. So this is kind of interesting. What is Thrasymachus trying to get at here? What is his response to Socrates? What do you think?
Is he saying because a ruler does what's advantageous for
he's basically saying something like, look, no true ruler makes a mistake when he's ruling, right? And then he lumps in with the example the physician or the grammarian and the accountant. No true ruler would make a mistake in legislating against their own interests. All right? Socrates is being a stickler here. And he's also doing something that is also philosophically interesting. So in philosophy, we distinguish between two different kinds of claims, or two different ways of talking. We talk about descriptive claims, which are basically descriptions of the world, trying to explain what the world is or how the world works. A science textbook utilizes descriptive claims. But then we also talk in prescriptive claims. Claims about what ought to be the case, what should be the case. If science and physics and chemistry and biology is descriptive, morality is prescriptive, right? You shouldn't lie to your brother. You should come to class. You ought to tell the truth, whatever it is. Thrasymachus, because he is a sophist, is kind of committed to what's called a morally relativist position. Do you all know what moral relativism is? We can contrast it, yeah.
I feel like there are different moral standards based on the society that you're in because there's different ideas and laws.
Yeah. A moral relativist believes there's no objectively true right and wrong actions everywhere at all times. What is right or wrong is relative to your culture or your society or your time in history. So, what's right or wrong changes. And there's no fact of the matter about what's right or wrong. It's dependent on other factors. It's relevant to other factors. The sophists are moral relativists like this, okay? They don't think that an action is always wrong or always right. It changes depending on the situation or your desire and all these other things. Now, Thrasymachus before was making descriptive claims about what a ruler is. He was saying, rulers legislate in their own interests. Justice is the advantage of the stronger. But now, what is he saying? It's interesting because he switched from using descriptive claims to prescriptive claims. Now he's saying, well, a true ruler ought to always legislate in their interests. That's what I mean when I say a ruler. So there's kind of a shift here that's happened, which is interesting. Because somebody who is a moral relativist, who's committed to this position, they're not going to say there's objective truth or facts in prescriptive claims. Okay? But now Thrasymachus is kind of relying on that being the case in order to push his argument forward. So in a strange philosophical way, he's betraying his own moral standard here. Okay? By lapsing into using prescriptive claims, now he's kind of playing Socrates' game, who thinks that there is an objective fact of the matter about how things ought to be and about how people ought to behave. Okay, so continuing on. It is in this loose way that you must also take the answer I gave just now. But the most precise answer is this. To the extent that he is a ruler, never makes errors, and unerringly decrees what is best for himself, and that is what his subject must do. Thus, as I said from the first, it is just to do what is advantageous for the stronger. Well, Thrasymachus, so you think I quibble, do you? Yes, I do. And you think that I asked the questions I did in a premeditated attempt to do you evil in the argument? I am certain of it, Thrasymachus says. Now, this is another interesting thing to say, right? Good and evil are strong categories, right? If you were to say something is evil, you mean something serious by that, right? If Thrasymachus really was a moral relativist, would he say anything is evil? No, right? There's nothing objectively good or evil. Depends on your society or your culture. So now he's accusing Socrates of being evil, again, betraying his own moral standard. Okay, he's not really a moral relativist, even though he's going to hide behind that smoke screen when people try to pick apart his moral arguments. I'm certain of it, but it won't do you any good. You will never be able to do me evil by covert means, and without them you will never be able to overpower me by argument. Bless you, Thrasymachus. I would not so much as try. But to prevent this sort of confusion from happening to us again, would you define whether you mean the ruler and stronger in the ordinary sense, or what you were just now calling the precise sense, when you say that it is just for the weaker to do what is advantageous for him, since he is the stronger? I mean the ruler in the most precise sense. Now do that evil if you can, and practice your quibbling on it. I ask no favors, but you will find there's nothing you can do. Do you think I'm crazy enough to try to shave a lion and quibble with Thrasymachus? So what kind of image is Socrates invoking again? We saw this last class. What was Thrasymachus compared to?
An animal.
An animal, right? Somebody with a beastly nature. Somebody you can't really reason with. Somebody who's aggressive, combative. And Socrates is basically saying, look, I'm not stupid enough to pick a fight with a beast. Okay? That's why he's saying I'm not going to try to shave a lion. Okay? The note says it's a proverbial characterization of an almost impossible task. Right? And Socrates knows that, look, this guy is aggressive. I'm not going to push his buttons. I'm not going to, or if I'm going to push him, I'm going to try to do them in a subtle way, let's say. Well, you certainly tried just now, although you were good for nothing at it too. More insults. That's enough of that. Socrates has had enough of it. Tell me, is a doctor in the precise sense the one you mentioned before? A moneymaker or someone who treats the sick? Tell me about the one who is really a doctor. Someone who treats the sick. What about a ship's captain? Is the true captain a ruler of sailors or a sailor? A ruler of sailors. In other words, we should not take any account of the fact that he sails in a ship, and he should not be called a sailor for that reason. For it is not because he is sailing that he is the ship's captain, but because of the craft he practices, of his rule over sailors. True. And is there something that is advantageous for sailors and for bodies? Certainly. And isn't it also the case that the natural aim of the craft is to consider and provide what is advantageous for each? Yes, that is its aim. And is anything advantageous for each of the crafts themselves besides being as complete as possible? How do you mean? It is like this. Suppose you ask me whether it is satisfactory for a body to be a body, or whether it needs something else. I would answer, of course it needs something. In fact, that is why the craft of medicine has been discovered, because a body is deficient, and it is not satisfactory for it to be like that. To provide what is advantageous, that is why what the craft was developed for. Do you think I'm speaking correctly in saying this or not? Correctly. What about medicine itself? Is it deficient? Does a craft need some further virtue, as the eyes are in need of sight and the ears of hearing, so that another craft is needed to consider and provide what is advantageous for them? Does a craft have some similar deficiency itself, so that each craft needs another to consider what is advantageous for it? And does the craft that does the considering need still another, and so on without end? Or does each consider by itself what is advantageous for it? Does it need neither itself nor another craft to consider what, in light of its own deficiency, is advantageous for it? Indeed, Is there no deficiency or error in any craft? And is it inappropriate for any craft to consider what is advantageous for anything besides that which with it deals? And since it is itself correct, is it without fault or impurity, so long as it is wholly and precisely the craft that it is? Consider this with that precision of language you mentioned. Is it so or not? It appears to be so. Then doesn't it follow that medicine does not consider what is advantageous for medicine, but for the body? Yes. And horse breeding does not consider what is advantageous for horse breeding, but for horses? Indeed, no other craft considers what is advantageous for itself, since it has no further needs. But what is advantageous for that with which it deals? Apparently so. Now surely, Thrasymachus, the various crafts rule over and are stronger than that which they deal. He gave in at this point as well, very reluctantly. So no kind of knowledge considers or enjoins what is advantageous for itself, but what is advantageous for the weaker, which is subject to it. He finally agreed to this too, although he tried to fight it. When he had agreed, however, I said, surely then no doctor, to the extent that he is a doctor, considers or enjoins what is advantageous for himself, but what is advantageous for his patient. For we agreed that a doctor, in the precise sense, is a ruler of bodies, not a moneymaker. Isn't that what we agreed? Yes. So a ship's captain, in the precise sense, is a ruler of sailors, not a sailor. That is what we agreed. Doesn't it follow that a ship's captain and ruler won't consider and enjoin what is advantageous for a captain, but what is advantageous for a sailor and his subject? He reluctantly agreed. So then, Thrasymachus, no one in any position of rule, to the extent that he is a ruler, considers or enjoins what is advantageous for himself, but what is advantageous for his subject. That on which he practices his craft. It is to his subject and what is advantageous and proper for it that he looks. And everything he says and does for it. So what is Socrates getting at here? Can anybody see his argument? Remember, Thrasymachus said that the ruler always does what is advantageous for himself or herself. Right? That's what it means to be just, is to kind of look out for yourself. And if you're strong, you decide the rules. But what is Socrates saying?
He's saying that he thinks it's just when a ruler does what is advantageous for his people.
Yeah. And what he tries to show is that it's this way for every craft. In the craft of medicine, a doctor doesn't practice medicine to make himself better, what is advantageous for him. A doctor practices medicine for the sake of his patients. Right? A ship's captain isn't a ship's captain to wield power for himself, but he rules over the other sailors, and he does what's best for the sailors. Same for horse breeding. Okay? Horse breeders are always looking to do what's advantageous for the horses, not themselves. In any craft in which something is presiding over another thing, the ruling element always does what is advantageous for what it's ruling over. In medicine, in horse breeding, in captaincy, and in ruling a city. So what Socrates is trying to say here is, look, it is not the case that the ruling element in a system is always looking out for itself. It's looking out for what it's presiding over, the thing over which it's ruling. Okay? And this extends also into the realm of politics. Any art is concerned with bettering what it rules over, not bettering itself. So in the art of political rule, it would be concerned with benefiting the subjects, the people, not the ruler. When we reached this point in the argument, and it was clear to all that Thrasymachus' account of justice had turned into its opposite, instead of answering, Thrasymachus said this: "Tell me, Socrates, do you still have a wet nurse?" What is Thrasymachus doing here? What kind of response is this?
Is he attacking his character?
Exactly. He's going for the ad hominem, okay? And this is exactly what Plato is trying to get us to realize a sophist will do when you argue with a sophist. Okay? They're either going to become quiet and shut down, or they're going to attack your character. They're going to attack you when you defeat them in argument.
What's a wet nurse?
A wet nurse is like somebody who takes care of you when you're a baby, when you're young. And so he says, "Tell me, Socrates, do you still have a wet nurse?" Socrates says, "What is that? Shouldn't you be giving answers rather than asking such things? Because she is letting you run around sniveling and doesn't wipe your nose when you need it. Since it is her fault that you do not know the difference between sheep and shepherds." So Thrasymachus becomes petulant, okay? He's just kind of lost this little debate with Socrates. Socrates has showed him that his account of justice is bad, it's wrong, it's insufficient. And what does he do? He immediately attacks Socrates' character. Okay? This is emblematic, Plato thinks, of sophistry. And Socrates says, okay, well, what exactly is it? I do not know. And Thrasymachus goes into this long spiel. You think that shepherds and cowherds consider what is good for the sheep and cattle, and fatten them and take care of them with some aim in mind other than what is good for their master and themselves. Moreover, you believe that rulers in cities, true rulers that is, think about their subjects in a different way than one does about sheep, and that what they consider night and day is something other than what is advantageous for themselves. You are so far from understanding justice and what is just, and injustice and what is unjust, that you do not realize that justice is really the good of another, what is advantageous for the stronger and the ruler, and harmful to the one who obeys and serves. Injustice is the opposite. It rules those simple-minded, for that is what they really are. Just people, and the ones it rules do what is advantageous for the other who is stronger. And they make the one they serve happy, but they do not make themselves the least bit happy. You must consider it as follows, Socrates, or you will be the most naive of all. A just man always gets less than an unjust one. First, in their contracts with one another, when a just man is partner to an unjust, you will never find that when the partnership ends, that the just one gets more than the unjust one, but less. Second, in matters relating to the city, when taxes are to be paid, a just man pays more on an equal amount of property and an unjust one less. But when the city is giving out refunds, a just man gets nothing, while an unjust one makes a large profit. Finally, when each of them holds political office, a just person, even if he is not penalized in other ways, finds that his private affairs deteriorate more because he has to neglect them, and that he gains no advantage from the public purse because of his justice, and that he is hated by his relatives and acquaintances because he is unwilling to do them an unjust favor. The opposite is true of an unjust man in every respect. I mean, of course, the person I described before, the man of great power who does better. So I'm going to stop there because that does better is important. What Plato means by does better is a Greek word, pleonexia. Okay? It doesn't have the same definition that we think of when we hear does better. What does better means in this context is wanting and achieving more than you have and need. Okay? Excess. Plato is going to end up saying, through Socrates in this text, that this wanting and having more than you need is going to be the chief cause of injustice. in a person and in a city. Wanting more than you need and more than you have, and trying to get that. And so what Thrasymachus is saying here is, look, the unjust person, in every respect, seems to come out on top over the just person. The just person has to follow rules, they'll pay their taxes on time, and when they rule over a city, they'll follow the laws. But what does an unjust person do? They get to skimp on their taxes, they get to take money from the public purse, they get to do unjust favors for people so people will like them. It seems like the unjust life is more profitable than the just life, right? And in a partnership with an unjust and a just person, the unjust person always comes out on top because the just person follows the rules and the unjust person can screw them over, right? So, Thrasymachus is trying to say, look, it's better for people. They'll get more stuff. They'll get more wealth, more property, if they're unjust. He is the one you should consider if you want to figure out how much more advantageous it is for the individual to be unjust than just. You will understand this most easily if you turn your thoughts to injustice of the most complete sort. The sort that makes those who do injustice happiest, and those who suffer it, those who are unwilling to do injustice, most wretched. The sort I mean is tyranny, because it uses both covert means and force to appropriate the property of others, whether it is sacred or secular, public or private, not little by little, but all at once. If someone commits a part of this sort of injustice and gets caught, he is punished and greatly reproached. Temple robbers, kidnappers, housebreakers, robbers, and thieves are what these partly unjust people are called when they commit those harms. When someone appropriates the possessions of the citizens, on the other hand, and then kidnaps and enslaves the possessors as well, instead of these shameful names, he is called happy and blessed. Now he has a bunch of stuff, right? Not only by the citizens themselves, but even by all who learn that he has committed the whole of injustice. And this is a very interesting point that he makes. For it is not the fear of doing injustice, but of suffering it, that elicits the reproaches of those who revile injustice. So what is he saying? Why do people say, oh, you're unjust, being unjust is bad? Why do people say that?
Because they're targeted by the injustice.
They don't want to suffer it, right? They're afraid to suffer it. Do you agree? Do people judge other things like justice? Call people unjust because they're afraid of suffering it themselves? Or are there other reasons? What do you think? Yeah.
I mean, I agree. I don't think anybody really wants to be a victim of injustice. But I do think that there are like more things that go into what makes something unjust.
So you don't want to suffer it, but maybe that's not your primary motivation for saying, hey, what you're doing is unjust. Maybe you're saying that because you just think what they're doing is wrong. Let me ask you this. For those of you that follow the laws, that follow the social norms of our society, do you do it because that's the right thing to do? Or do you do it because you're afraid of getting caught and facing punishment? Would you break the laws and do unjust things if you could get away with it?
I would 100% speed if there was no speed limit. Like, because I'm good at driving, so I feel like I should be able to go faster than the speed limit that's like 25 for no reason. But I do it because I don't like a speeding ticket.
Okay, yeah, so you're afraid of suffering the punishment if you get caught. But otherwise you would speak.
Yeah, 100%.
What about stealing or murder? Would you steal from a store if you knew you wouldn't get caught?
It's like the moral dilemma with the purge.
Okay, speak more into that. What do you mean by that?
It's like, so in the movie The Purge, the whole idea is that society and like humanity as a whole has one day to really express those inner like rule-fearing desires to like almost just like the human nature of sin itself.
All the laws, nobody will be penalized for breaking any laws on that day,
And
right?
it's a silly concept in itself, but it reflects and shows a darker side of humanity that if we could do these things, a lot of people would. And how many people would actually, and also it's kind of classist inherently, because like if you're poor, you're probably going to be doing those things because that's a mean of survival, while richer people can kind of sit at home. But some richer people do it anyway too.
Yeah. They have the tools, they have the resources to go out and kill people if they want to for fun.
Yeah.
Right? Or maybe those home defense systems, right? To keep themselves and their families safe. Thrasymachus is saying here that, look, people don't call things that are unjust bad because they're actually bad. They're just saying that because they don't want to suffer injustice. It's a little cynical, right? But maybe there's a grain of truth to that. I don't know. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm confused because it seems like from his account of what an unjust person is, these same rulers that he was just talking about would also be unjust. Like he talks
Which
about,
ones?
So remember before they were talking about how a ruler always does what's advocates for themselves.
Right, yeah.
But these same rulers are the same people who have access and have more money, more resources than everyone else. But then he goes and says the unjust person. It says then he goes and talks about how an unjust person it has more than other people. But if that's the case, then these same rulers would be unjust. And I'm not sure if I'm misunderstanding what he's saying.
So when he says unjust, basically what he just means is like the person who's strong and can take what they want. You know? And so what he's trying to get at is, even though people say injustice is bad, being unjust is bad, like look, it's not actually bad. Okay? Look at all the great things that you can have if you're unjust. You can steal from people, you can screw people over, you can take their property, and we would call those people happy and blessed, he says. He says people call these people happy and blessed because now they have a lot of crap. They have a lot of wealth and resources. And maybe they call them happy and blessed because they're afraid of what the unjust person might do to them if they get called out. You know? So I'm not sure which people you're talking about when you say he's calling one of them unjust. Yeah, look for it, and I'm going to continue on, okay? Okay, so he continues on. So you see, Socrates, injustice, if it is on a large enough scale, is stronger, freer, and more masterful than justice. And as I said from the beginning, justice is what is advantageous for the stronger, while injustice is profitable and advantageous for oneself. Having like a bath attendant emptied this great flood of words into our ears all at once, Thrasymachus was thinking of leaving. But those present wouldn't let him. They made him stay and give an account of what he had said. So it might be helpful for you to know the historical context here. So during this time of the ancient Greeks and Romans, they had public bathhouses, okay, where people would go have conversations and bathe. And there were people working at these bathhouses who would periodically go to the baths, these giant baths, and pour hot water into the bath to keep the water warm. And then after they pour their water in, they just walk away, right? Because their job is done. That is what Thrasymachus is being compared to here. A bath attendant who's emptied a great flood of words into our ears, and he was thinking of just leaving. Thrasymachus thinks he's made his point, he's put Socrates in his place, and now he's going to make a swift exit. Okay? But the other people want him to stay and explain what he means by all this. Because they don't completely understand Thrasymachus' position either. And I myself was particularly insistent, Socrates said. You are marvelous, Thrasymachus. After hurling such a speech at us, you surely cannot be thinking of leaving before you have adequately instructed us, or learned yourself, whether you are right or not. Or do you think it is a trivial matter you are trying to determine, and not rather a way of life, the one that would make living life that way most profitable for each of us? So Socrates is kind of appealing to his sophist nature here. Because Thrasymachus has just provided his answer for what he thinks justice is, and why injustice is more profitable than being a just person and following the rules. And Socrates basically says, like, no, stay. Like, we want to learn what you have to say. Kind of implying, hey, like, this might be a good business opportunity if you don't walk away now. Like, hey, don't you want these young men to pay for your services? Trying to get Thrasymachus to stay. And he says, it would be profitable for us to understand what you're trying to get at, how we ought to live our lives. Thrasymachus responds, do you mean that I do not think it is a serious matter? Socrates shoots back, either that, or you care nothing for us, and so are not worried about whether we will live better or worse lives because of our ignorance of what you claim to know. No, be a good fellow and show some willingness to teach us. You won't do badly for yourself if you help a group as large as ours, right? Giving us what you know. It could be a good business opportunity. Don't you want to stay, buddy? For my own part, I will tell you that I am not persuaded. I do not believe that injustice is more profitable than justice, not even if you should give it full scope to do what it wants. Suppose, my good fellow, that there is an unjust person, and he does have the power to do injustice, whether by covert means or open warfare. Nonetheless, he does not persuade me that injustice is more profitable than justice. Perhaps someone here besides myself feels the same as I do. So, blessed though you are going to have to fully persuade us that we are wrong to value justice more highly than injustice in deliberating. And how am I to persuade you? If you are not persuaded by what I just said now, what more can I do? Am I to take my argument and pour it into your very soul? Again, bath attendant imagery. No, by Zeus, do not do that. But first stick to what you have said, or if you change your position, do it openly and do not try to deceive us. You see, Thrasymachus, having defined the true doctor, to continue examining the things you said before, you did not consider it necessary to maintain the same level of exactness when you later turned to the true shepherd. So here he's holding Thrasymachus to his own standard, right? Being exact with his words and definitions. You do not think a shepherd, to the extent that he is a shepherd, fattens sheep with the aim of doing what is best for them, but you think that, like a guest about to be entertained at a feast, his aim is to eat well or to make a future sale, as if he were a moneymaker, rather than a shepherd. But of course, the only concern of the craft of shepherding is to provide what is best for that with which it deals, since it itself is adequately provided with all it needs to be at its best, as we know, when it does not fall short in any way of being the craft of shepherding. That is why I, at any rate, thought it necessary for us to agree before that every kind of rule, to the extent that it is a kind of rule, does not seek anything other than what is best for the thing it rules and cares for. And this is true both in political and in private rule. But do you think that those who rule cities, the ones who are truly rulers, rule willingly? I do not think it by Zeus, I know it. But Thrasymachus, don't you realize that in other kinds of rule there is no willing ruler? On the contrary, these people demand wages on the assumption that their ruling will benefit not themselves, but their subjects. For tell me, don't we say that each craft differs from every other in the power it has? Blessed though you are, please don't answer contrary to your belief, so that we can come to some definite conclusion here. Yes, that is what differentiates them. And doesn't each craft provide us with a particular benefit different from the others? For example, medicine provides us with health, captaincy with safety at sea, and so on with the others? Certainly. And doesn't wage earning provide us with wages, since that is what it is capable of doing? Or would you call medicine the same craft as captaincy? Indeed, if you want to define matters precisely as you proposed, even if someone who is a ship's captain becomes healthy, because what is advantageous for him is sailing on the sea, you would not for that reason call what he does medicine, would you? Of course not. Nor would you call wage earning medicine, even if someone becomes healthy while earning wages? Of course not. Nor would you call medicine wage earning, even if someone earns pay while healing? No. We are agreed then, aren't we, that each craft brings its own special benefit? Yes, we are. So whatever benefit all craftsmen jointly receive must clearly derive from their joint practice of some additional craft that is the same for each of them. It seems so. And we say that the additional craft in question, which benefits the craftsman by earning them wages, is the craft of wage earning? He reluctantly agreed. Then this very benefit, receiving wages, is not provided to each of them by his own craft. On the contrary, if we are to examine the matter precisely, medicine provides health, and wage earning provides a wage. House building provides a house, and wage earning, which accompanies it, provides a wage. And so on with the other crafts. Each of them does its own work and benefits that with which it deals, that which it rules over. So wages aside, is there any benefit that craftsmen get from their craft? Apparently not. But he still provides a benefit, even when he works for nothing? Yes, I think he does. Then it is clear now, Thrasymachus, that no type of craft or rule provides what is beneficial for itself. But as we have been saying for some time, it provides and enjoins what is beneficial for its subject and aims at what is advantageous for it. The weaker, not the stronger. That is why I said just now, my dear Thrasymachus, that no one chooses to rule voluntarily and take other people's troubles in hand and straighten them out, but each asks for a wage. You see, anyone who is going to practice this type of craft well never does or enjoins what is best for himself, at least not when he is acting as his craft prescribes, but what is best for his subject. It is because of this, it seems, that wages must be provided to a person if he is going to be willing to rule, whether they are in the form of money or honor or a penalty if he refuses. And now Glaucon chimes in. What do you mean, Socrates? I'm familiar with the first two kinds of wages, money or honor, but I do not understand what penalty you mean, or how you can call it a wage. Then you do not understand the sort of wages for which the best people rule when they are willing to rule. Don't you know that those who love honor and those who love money are despised, and rightly so? I do. Well then, that is why good people won't be willing to rule for the sake of money or honor. You see, if they are paid wages openly for ruling, they will be called hirelings. And if they take them covertly as the fruits of their rule, they will be called thieves. On the other hand, they won't rule for the sake of honor either, since they are not ambitious honor lovers. So if they are going to be willing to rule, some compulsion or punishment must be brought to bear on them. That is probably why wanting to rule when one does not have to is thought to be shameful. Now, the greatest punishment for being unwilling to rule is being ruled by someone worse than oneself. And I think it is fear of that makes good people rule when they do rule. They approach ruling not as though they were going to do something good or as though they were going to enjoy themselves in it, but as something compulsory, something they have to do, since it cannot be entrusted to anyone better than or even as good as themselves. In a city of good men, if it came into being, the citizens would fight in order not to rule, just as they now do in order to rule. There, it would be quite clear that anyone who is really and truly a ruler does not naturally seek what is advantageous for himself, but what is so for his subject. As a result, anyone with any sense would prefer to be benefited by another than go to the trouble of benefiting him. So I cannot at all agree with Thrasymachus that justice is what is advantageous for the stronger. So Socrates has said a lot here, right? He says, look, he reiterates the argument that he put before, that anybody who rules over anything or practices a craft is always doing what is best for the object of the craft. And then he said, look, even rulers, a lot of them only want to rule because the rule can't be entrusted to anybody else. Those other people will do it badly, and then they'll suffer the consequences of bad rule. So that's why they want to rule. Or they'll work for a wage. But the wage, again, is a separate thing than the craft that the person is practicing. Right? When the person is practicing their craft, whether it's medicine, whether it's captaincy, or whether it's being the ruler of a city, they're not doing that for themselves. They're doing it for the good of the thing that they're ruling over. But we will look further into that another time. What Thrasymachus is now saying, that the life of an unjust person is better than that of a just one, seems to be of far greater importance. Which life would you choose, Glaucon, and which of our views do you think is closer to the truth? I think the life of a just person is more profitable. Did you hear all the good things Thrasymachus attributed a moment ago to the unjust man? I did, but I am not persuaded. Then do you want us to persuade him if we can find a way that what he says is not true? Of course I do. Well, if we oppose him with a speech parallel to his, enumerating in turn the many good things that come from being just, and he replies, and then we do, we will have to count and measure the good things mentioned on each side, and we will need a jury to decide the case. But if, on the other hand, we investigate the question, as we have been doing, by seeking agreement with each other, we ourselves can be both jury and advocates at once. Glaucon says, okay, let's do it this way. Certainly. Then which approach do you prefer? The second. Come on then, Thrasymachus, answer us from the beginning. You say, don't you, that complete injustice is more profitable than complete justice? I certainly have said that, and I have told you why. Well then, what do you say about this? Do you call one of the two a virtue and the other a vice? Of course. That is to say, you call justice a virtue and injustice a vice? Is that likely, sweetest one, when I say that injustice is profitable and justice is not? Then what exactly do you say? The opposite. That justice is a vice. No, just a very noble naivete. So you call injustice deviousness. No, I call it being prudent. Do you also consider unjust people to be wise and good, Thrasymachus? Yes, if they commit complete injustice and can bring cities and whole nations under their power. Perhaps you thought I meant pickpockets? Not that such crimes aren't also profitable, if they are not to be found out. But they are not worth discussing by comparison to what I described. Yes, I'm not unaware of what you mean. But this did surprise me. that you include injustice with virtue and wisdom, injustice with their opposites. Nevertheless, that is where I put them. That is now a harder problem, comrade, and it's not easy to know what to say in response. If you had declared that injustice is more profitable, but agreed that it is a vice or shameful, as some others do, we could be discussing the matter on the basis of conventional norms. But now, obviously, you will say that injustice is fine and strong, and apply to it all the attributes we use to apply to justice, since you dare to include it with virtue and wisdom. You have guessed my views exactly. All at the same time, we must not shrink from pursuing the argument and looking into this, just as long as I take you to be saying what you really think. You see, I believe that you really are not joking now, Thrasymachus, but saying what you believe to be the truth. What difference does it make to you whether I believe it or not? Isn't it my account you are supposed to be refuting? This is an interesting response, because it reveals another opinion or view that Plato has of the sophists. Okay? When you're engaging in a conversation with someone and you're trying to figure out what the truth is, do you state what you believe, or do you just put up things random people say in empty accounts? Which one would you say is more authentic?
Saying something that you believe in.
Right. I think that's right. And I think that Plato has this view of philosophy, this view of discovering or finding the truth, that should be in line with authenticity. Okay? When we have conversations with other people, we should express what we believe. We shouldn't just try to put up random accounts and critique them or knock them down. Okay? We should try to be authentic. If we're honestly pursuing the truth, we should be authentic. Thrasymachus is implying here that authenticity doesn't matter at all to him. Okay? Remember, he sees conversations as a battle, as combat. He wants to win. It doesn't matter what he believes. He's in it to make a buck, and he's in it to win. Okay? And remember, because he's a sophist, he's not interested in philosophy and discovering the truth. He's interested in using rhetoric to achieve his own ends and to sell his services to people to make money. So we see Plato basically associating philosophy and the discovery of truth with authenticity, and sophistry with inauthenticity and rhetoric. Bad faith. Socrates says, well, it makes no difference at the end of the day. But here's a further question I would like you to try to answer. Do you think that a just person wants to do better than another just person? What do we mean by do better again? Do y'all remember? What does it mean to do better in this context?
Have excess.
Right. To want and to acquire more than you need. So Socrates asks him, do you think that a just person wants to acquire more than they have or need than another just person? Not at all. Otherwise, he would not be the civilized and naive person he actually is. What about, then, the just action? No, not than that either. And does he claim that he deserves to do better than an unjust person and believe that it is just for him to do so? Or doesn't he believe that? He would want to do better than him, and he would claim to deserve to do so, but he would not be able. That is not what I am asking, but whether a just person wants and claims to deserve to have more than he needs than an unjust person, but not than a just one. He does. What about an unjust person? Does he claim that he deserves to do better than a just person or a just action? Of course he does. He thinks he deserves to do better than everyone. The unjust person wants to have and acquire more than anybody else, and he feels like he deserves it. Perhaps he has the power to make it happen. Then will an unjust person also do better than an unjust person or an unjust action? And will he strive to get the most he can for himself from everyone? He will. Let's put it this way. A just person does not do better than someone like himself, but someone unlike himself. Whereas an unjust person does better than those who are like and those who are unlike himself. Very well put. Now an unjust person is wise and good, you say, and a just one is neither. That is well put too. So isn't an unjust person also like a wise and good person, while the just person is not? Of course. How could he fail to be like people who have such qualities when he himself has them? But the just person is not like them. Fine. Then each of them has the qualities of the people he is like. What else could he have? All right, Thrasymachus, do you call one person musical and another non-musical? I do. Which of them is wise in music and which is not? The musical one is wise, presumably, and the other not wise. And in the things in which he is wise, he is good. And in the things in which he is not wise, he is bad? Yes. Isn't the same true of a doctor? It is. Do you think then, Thrasymachus, that a man who is a musician, when he is tuning his lyre and tightening and loosening the strings, wants to do better than another musician? And does he claim that that is what he deserves? Thrasymachus says, I do not. So the image Socrates is bringing up here is, look, when you have a band and they're all going to play together, they're going to play a piece of music together. Does the lyre player try to do better, acquire more than the trumpet player? If they're trying to play a piece of music together in harmony, no, they all have to play their part well, right? And do it in concert together. They need to work together. And Thrasymachus concedes this. But does the musician want to do better than a non-musician? Necessarily. What about a doctor? When he is prescribing food and drink, does he want to do better than another doctor or than medical practice? Certainly not. But he does want to do better than a non-doctor. Yes. All right. This is interesting, what Socrates is going to say. In any branch of knowledge or ignorance, do you think that a knowledgeable person would intentionally try to take more for himself than another knowledgeable person? Or to do or say more, and not rather exactly what the one like himself would do in the same situation? No, I imagine it must be as you say. And what about an ignorant person? Doesn't he want to do better than both a knowledgeable person and an ignorant one? I suppose so. A knowledgeable person is wise? I agree. And a wise one is good? I agree. So a good and wise person does not want to do better than someone like himself, but someone both unlike and opposite to him. So it seems. But a bad and ignorant person wants to do better than both his like and his opposite. Apparently. Well, Thrasymachus, we found that an unjust person tries to do better than those like him and unlike him. Didn't you say that? I did. And that a just person won't do better than those like him, but those unlike him. Yes. Then a just person is like a wise and good person, and an unjust person is like an ignorant and bad one. It looks that way. Moreover, we agreed that each has the qualities of the one he resembles. Yes, we did. A just person, then, has turned out to be good and wise, and an unjust one, ignorant and bad. So what has Socrates done here? He's kind of flipped it around on Thrasymachus, right? By talking about what the unjust person is trying to be like, what the just person is trying to be like, what he's shown, he thinks, is that the just person contrary to what Thrasymachus says, is actually good and wise. And the unjust person is bad and ignorant. And his argument for this is a little weird. Okay? Basically what he's saying is that in cases like medicine, in cases like captaincy, in all of these arts, the true knower, or the true artist, or the true technician, only wants to get the better of the ignorant. Okay? They're not trying to get better over another doctor, or another musician, or another captain. And we can see this in practice, right? If somebody fell onto the floor here and needed CPR, if a doctor rushed in and started doing CPR, and then 10 seconds later another doctor came in, the doctor wouldn't interrupt the doctor doing the CPR, right? If the person needed it. They'd be like, oh, they got it taken care of, right? But if somebody ran in and started singing lullabies and saying, this person needs a lullaby right now, and they were choking, and a doctor came in and saw this, he'd be like, get out of the way, we have to do CPR, you idiot. Right? So, the person who is good at their craft, or the artist, or the ruler, they only try to get better of the ignorant people who can cause damage. They're not trying to practice their craft to better themselves, okay? Or get the better of anybody. Thus, it turns out, as Socrates shows through this strange roundabout way, a just person is wise and good, and an unjust one bad and ignorant. And Thrasymachus' response to this is great. Thrasymachus agreed to all of this, not easily as I am telling it, but reluctantly, with toil, trouble, and, since it was summer, a quantity of sweat that was amazing to behold. And then I saw something I had never seen before. Thrasymachus blushing. Why is he blushing? What would you feel in a circumstance in which someone just spanked you in an argument? You feel a little embarrassed, right? You might blush. And it's hot, so he's sweating profusely as well. After being just destroyed by Socrates, Thrasymachus is embarrassed. Okay? He's blushing, he's sweating. What Socrates has managed to do here is he's shown that Thrasymachus does not have a mastery over language, like sophists are supposed to do, and Thrasymachus does not understand justice, like he claimed to do, thereby decreasing his reputation in front of the young men that he's trying to sell his services to. Right? So he blushes. And he is not going to be happy. Okay, let's stop there. We'll pick it up at on Thursday at 3:50 D5. Okay? 3:50 D5. Write that down. Have a good day, everyone.